thank you for being here. I hope you can hear me in the back. The history of this, our university have the tradition that when you are promoted as a professor, you must do an inaugural lecture. And at that time, I tried to delay it, and I got away with it for about 18 months, because nobody wants to do that. And then they said, you know, you must do it now. And then I thought about what can I do that is sort of special and new. And because of my past involvement with SAIIE, and also because of my devotion to our discipline, I thought that maybe it makes sense that we try to understand what is the status of industrial engineering in South Africa, and also then try to publish it. And what happened with this is this was presented in October of last year. This is now exactly the third time I'm presenting this. This was then also formalized in an article in the SAIIE journal, where I used two of my PhD students who helped me with this. Wouter Bom, is he here? There's Wouter, he's one of the co-authors, and he helped me to get this into a proper state. So this is all about the challenges and status of industrial engineering in South Africa. Dear SAIIE members, colleagues, students, friends, it's nice to be here today. Also, welcome to Mr. Charles Babbage. Do you know who that is? He's one of the fathers of our discipline. He visited factories in the 1800s in the UK and US of A, and he started analyzing operations like a proper industrial engineer. And his conclusions were that money could be saved by using women and children to perform these lower skilled operations, and that the higher skilled, higher paid men need to only perform those operations that require the higher skills. Those findings are no longer acceptable in our current times, as you can hear, from a small minority. Okay. We are living in a changing environment. And this is a Shapiro comic of a year ago, and it's very applicable today, where we need to run away from taxi wars, the economy, Zuman Company, campus violence, Air Gupta, etc., etc., etc. And instead of putting Wade van Niekerk in there, we can say this is us. We need to be ready. We are living in changing times. Before we continue, it's always nice to go and have a look at the history of industrial engineering in South Africa. And we have something to be proud of. In the 1920s, we started to industrialize. And ISCAR and ESCOM was created in those days. In the 1940s, we entered World War II, and there was a scarcity of resources, of imports, and that also helped along that we needed to industrialize. And SASOL and the Industrial Development Corporation was created in those days. The people involved in this started to organize themselves in a production engineering environment. And then in 1964, under the leadership and guidance of Professor Chris Arendorf, the first industrial engineering graduates were delivered by the University of Pretoria. And that was then formalized in a separate department in 1967. In the 1970s, Wits and Stellenbosch also woke up and started to deliver industrial engineers. And in 1981, SAIIE was established as a Section 21 company. In 1984, the first woman industrial engineer was delivered, Susan Arendorf. Also the first black industrial engineer at Wits. In 1985, the Stellenbosch industrial engineer had his 30th anniversary. It was created in 1985 as a separate unit, and we celebrated our 30th anniversary last year. And in 1986, Professor Paul Creer, was the first locally bred industrial engineer who became the SAIIE president. So a nice history, and you can see that we have something to be proud of. If you go and have a look at the research trends, and this is an analysis that we did a few years ago by comparing research in industrial engineering journals. And we compared it to a bit of research that was done across all industrial engineering journals, also specifically with what was happening in computers and industrial engineering in the States, with what is happening, oh my goodness, with what is happening in our own local journal. And what is interesting here is that, firstly, we follow mostly what is happening internationally. Secondly, is that we are lagging in those areas of intelligent systems and methods, and that we have more focus on project management and production management. But in general, what we are doing in South Africa research-wise follows the trends internationally. Secondly, what happened with the economy? This is a nice map that shows you the economic activity, and you can see that we are sort of here in a slightly dead spot, but but the rest of it, we can see where the main activity is. But what is important here is that in the last 20 years, the GDP increased by 89%. So the economy had a tremendous growth. If you also compare the different GDP sectors, you will see that some sectors decreased in terms of its relative importance. It doesn't mean that they decreased overall, because remember, the economy still grew with 89%, but they are less important compared to the rest. And others had increased significantly in the areas of finance, real estate, and also transport and storage, wholesale, retail, and catering. That's the green bits. It means that when I've completed my degree as an industrial engineer, my options were mostly limited to manufacturing. Nowadays, your options are in different areas. It means that industrial engineers are now employed in a very different economy than 30 years ago. Here's something else that is a worry. Given our engine and a change to a need, we need to think about what is necessary to produce new IEs, industrial engineers. We are seeing a lack of industrial engineers. We are identified by the Department of Higher Education as one of the scarce skills. But while we are identified as number 8 on the list of scarce skills, and the supply of IE practitioners had not met the demand as per the reports, we are dead last in terms of the quality of maths and science at schools. Number 144. Of the 600,000 candidates who wrote school leaving exams in 2009, only 22% passed maths higher grade, and only 7% passed physical science higher grade in the same year, and only 28% of the students in public higher education were enrolled for programs in science, engineering, and technology. It means that we are feeding industrial engineers of the future out of a smaller and smaller pool of candidates. So where are these guys going when they want to study? We basically did a survey then last year, and that was distributed to all industrial engineers in South Africa. And we basically looked at alumni lists. We also looked at SAIIE members and tried to contact as many as possible. We also looked at SAIIE membership data that SAIIE made available for us, and then I also had some emails to some of the universities to get some feeling of what is happening there. We have 4 academic programs. Tikkies, who was first, Wits and Stellenbosch, and then also the Northwest University, who has now third-year students. Is that right? Okay, so they haven't delivered yet, but it's coming. And then we have quite a number of technical universities and comprehensive universities. UJ and NMMU, both comprehensive universities, but in terms of industrial engineering, they are delivering technical BTECs and diplomas. If you go and have a look at the industrial engineers out there, 54% of everybody surveyed was educated in an academic university. Only 4 available, only 3 of them produced these candidates. The rest came from foreign universities and technical and comprehensive universities. And these are for all ages. If you go and look at the under 40s, that 54% there goes down to 50%. So not a big change. It means that the majority of all industrial engineers out there at the moment has an academic background. And about 30% has a BTEC or a diploma background. Okay. Let's look at qualifications. From the same survey, we asked them what were your qualifications, and again the colors are a bit weird, but 30% of all industrial engineers has a B-Eng or a BSc-Eng. 29.6%, which is basically your BTECs and diplomas, has a technical background, and then the blue ones are all those with postgraduate qualifications. And then 6.5% represent the student members of SAIIE. So it's quite impressive that the largest group here are postgraduates. It means the largest population group here actually have a postgraduate qualification. The second largest, your bachelor's from an academic university, and the third largest in your technical. And they are actually very closely distributed, evenly. If you go and compare on where they are employed, you get another interesting picture. Firstly, while manufacturing is now only about 14% of your GDP, we still employ more than 25% of our industrial engineers in there. And I was actually quite surprised by that. Manufacturing is still a very important component. Secondly, there are 2 areas that has grown significantly in terms of its relative contribution to the GDP, and that is your wholesale retail areas and also your general government services. And we are underrepresented in that. Okay. A little bit careful here, because this doesn't really model the affinity or capacity of those sectors to absorb industrial engineers. It basically just compares. So there is a bit of an unfair comparison maybe. But it tells us that maybe there are opportunities in other areas. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of a shocking view here. I had a final year project student this year who specifically looked at general government services. And you might have seen the survey going around as well in the last few months. But I'm going to give you, what he did is he interviewed municipal stakeholders. That means technical managers or municipal managers in the large metros. Okay? And this is Nelson Mandela Metro. And that interview gave me hope. Have you ever heard of industrial engineering? Yes, I've heard of industrial engineering. My understanding is that anywhere there is work, an IE will be able to help, be it to improve systems or to increase productivity and performance using any resources available. Okay, it sounds fair. Look at this one. Tshwane municipality. Tikkies, what are you doing? Have you ever heard of industrial engineering? Industrial engineers work in industry. We in a city municipality do not need them so much. Do you know what some of the skills are that industrial engineers have? Engineers do practical things and fix things and sometimes design new things. Do you believe that industrial engineers are applicable in the public sector? The public sector is not in industry so much and therefore do not need these engineers so much. Oh my goodness. We basically interviewed 7 of these municipalities, and these are the largest ones. Okay? The ones that were positive and understood what industrial engineering was all about was Nelson Mandela and Cape Town. Johannesburg sort of thought that they could be used for project management, and the others had simply no idea. Tshwane, Mangaung, eThekwini, and Buffalo City. Guys, if we want to be successful in other sectors, we need to educate people about what we do. Okay, so let's look now at who do industrial engineers work for, and this is one of the challenges. These are the 13 largest employers if you look at where SAIIE members work. Okay? Again, SAIIE members is a subset. SAIIE has, I don't know, about 1,800 members on the books. Not all of them always pay, but I think if you listen to what Roland said yesterday, there is probably about 8,000 in total in the country who was actually educated here. So this is probably about 25% of your population. Largest employer here, Sasol. Second largest Transnet, then Eskom, then Imperial Group, then LTS Consulting, then UTI, Anglo American, and Stellenbosch University features there, which is quite shocking. When you get to number 13, up there, which is Exaro, that represented 10 members on the SAIIE membership list. Okay, it doesn't mean that all employers encourage their employees to be SAIIE members. Some do it more. I know LTS, for example, has a program to encourage people. But it gives you an impression that even in companies as large as Exaro, you as an industrial engineer are part of a very small group of people. And that means that you often are at risk of losing the industrial engineering identity. Okay. Number 13, only 10 industrial engineers. Okay. It means that most of us work in a very small community and we must always advocate what we can do. Let's get to the more sensitive stuff now. Race and gender. And I already was a bit in trouble with Bernadette a while ago. In the back there, sorry. Race and gender, if you look at SAIIE members across all ages, in terms of white, only 9% are women. In terms of black, only 8%. Right. So you can see that women, despite of industrial engineering being a very accommodating discipline, is still lagging significantly here. And if you go and filter now for the younger than 40s, I'm just going to flick back and forward, you can see it didn't improve a lot. Okay. So typically women only makes about 10%, or sorry, 10% of 40%, so about 25% of the workforce all time. Okay. More sensitive even is when you start comparing race now. And if you look at where industrial engineers are educated, if you look at the white population, 91% of white industrial engineers were educated at an academic university. And then you get various shades of grey between with Indian and coloured, and when you get to the black population, only 17% were educated in an academic university. 18% in comprehensive universities and 38% in a technical university. And 27% came from outside the country, places like Zimbabwe, etc. And that is scary. Let's look at from the other side. Let's compare the racial composition of each university type. Foreign universities, 90% are black. Technical universities, 86% of those students are black. Comprehensive universities, 72%. Academic universities, only 13%. 83% are white. Can you see that there's a problem here? Okay. So 83% white in academic universities, 70% BCI, black colored Indian. Foreign, technical universities, 95% black colored Indian, 5% white. So let's park that for a moment. Let's go and have a look then at the academic universities. How are they doing really? And what I did here is I basically just looked at the 4 academic universities, Northwest, Stellenbosch, Wits, and Tukkies, and I asked them, what is your racial composition of your final year class? And overall, I actually look at final year and first year, and overall, 77% of the students are white. Final year, 75%. And you can see that the black portion, which is the 70%, 12% final year, very small. Okay. If you go and have a look at the individual universities, Wits was actually the most transformed. Okay. But Wits is also very small. It doesn't really make a big impact to this imbalance. University of Pretoria, very close to these figures. So they are sort of on the average here. And Stellenbosch and Northwest, the least transformed. Okay. So that's scary. So then I started to wonder, but how does industry perceive this imbalance that we see here? And what I then did is, from the survey that we did, we basically asked everybody how comfortable they are and how experienced they are in certain of those sub-disciplines, like project management, like business analysts, etc., etc. And from that then I sort of created a complexity factor from my own perception of how complicated the area is, and also what is the person's comfort with that, and I calculated a utility complexity factor. Okay. That means that for each and every respondent, I could calculate sort of a score at how good he is with complex stuff. Okay. And one can argue a lot about whether my calculation was okay or not, but what I then did is I said, okay, but if you are a good industrial engineer, you are probably paid more than the others who are not that good or not that experienced. So I then just correlated with that with your income, and that showed me that, yeah, it sort of makes sense. Okay, so I said, okay, let's go and use it now. And then I said, okay, but if I go and get the average utility complexity factor for industrial engineers from a technical university, it is much lower than what you get from students from a comprehensive university, and again, much lower than what you get from students who were educated in an academic university. Okay. So it means that, remember, this is your own perception at how experienced and comfortable you are with those fields. Okay? It wasn't me saying something, but people from a technical background felt less useful than people from academic background. So academic universities had the highest utility complexity, and technical universities the lowest. I then had access to another source, and that was a special report that SAIIE did a few years ago with Louis Hill and Associates. And they basically had an employer questionnaire that tried to assess the competence of the BTech and diploma qualifications in industrial engineering. And what they said, okay, the BTechs is the red ones, is that 59% of the BTechs is about okay. 33% of them, the competency is too low, and 7% is better than required. If you go to diplomas, 50% about right, 50% too low. Okay. there was also another question there. If you had the chance, who would you employ again? And then 67% said, I would rather employ a graduate industrial engineer. 25% said, I would do about the same of both, and 7% I would employ more diplomas and BTECs. Okay. So it means that there's also a perception within industry, employers, that there's a problem. Okay. Here's a bit more interesting. What are the typical earnings? And you can see here, that is 3% earns less than 100,000 per year, 90% between 100,000 and 300,000, 24% between 300,000 and 500,000, 18% between 500 and, is it 600,000? 700,000, that's between 700,000 and a million, that's a million to 1.5 million, and then you have a few people who actually do quite well. I'm not one of them. But it gives you a feeling of what is the spread. Now, when you start to analyze now, again, who earns what? Firstly, it seems that we are rewarding experience. The blue bit there, for the lowest income, are those people with less than 5 years. And you can see it's here. And then as you get more experience, you move upwards. So we are rewarding experience. Okay. Then income versus gender. Glass ceiling, oh my goodness, comes to mind again. I think it's partly because this is still moving out. At younger ages, there's a lot of parity. You can see here between women and men, it's a lot more parity in the lower income or the lower experience groups. But once you get to the more experienced groups, probably because of its history, it is less so. So hopefully that will change. So females are well represented in the lower ones, but males still dominant in the higher income groups. Now, income versus university type. And here you can see the scary thing. That is that your academic university people are making up the higher proportion, and that your academic and comprehensive people are sitting in this triangle at the bottom. Okay. This means that there is a limited career growth for technical and comprehensive university graduates in this data. So let's discuss conclusions. Firstly, industrial engineering is strong and established in South Africa, and it's nice to see that happening. We are positively contributing to the economy. Our academics are also conducting relevant research. It is following the international trends, and this research is gaining visibility. There's also opportunities in some of the industry sectors. However, we will find that we need to do a lot of marketing there, and it's also very sensitive for racial composition. Academic IEs have a much better utility and application in industry than your technical graduates. So there's an imbalance. The black-colored and Indian IEs from technical universities versus the white IEs from your academic universities. There's a divide that's very apparent. Your black-colored Indian industrial engineers consequently end up in positions where they are less influential, earn less, have limited career growth, and therefore are not role models to attract more students into the discipline. This hampers the growth of the discipline in important industry sectors such as general government services. So what must we do? There's some opportunities here. We must attract more black-colored Indian students into the academic programs. We need to have bursaries to make that possible. We need to try and build a strong core. If you have a strong core of black-colored Indian students who are successful in university, that will automatically create more interest and people will feel more welcome and will want to join you. Word of mouth becomes important here. We need to remove the obstacles. And you will see in the press in the last year, our university, the language policy, it is an obstacle. We also need to think about the market. Why is the market not helping us to make this possible? We also need to adjust. We need to adjust the technical programs to increase the utility and complexity of your technical qualifications. And I think that is happening now. All the technical universities are looking at their curriculums again and adjusting it to fit into the new programs. We need to filter for quality. We need to also, if you are a technical university, you need to identify the very strong people who are not supposed to be there and rather refer them to the academic university. In terms of marketing, we need to market our capabilities into all the industry sectors. You've seen the shocking quotes I had from the municipalities. Identify the typical IE that can contribute per sector. Set up this profile of what does a municipal industrial engineer look like? What can he do? Sensitize and encourage employers in this sector to these qualities. Then collaboration. Nobody can do this alone. There's industry, there's academia, there's SAIIE. We must work together to make this change. One group alone cannot make this successful. And then lastly, is we also need to identify the role models in the community. We need to create visibility for those role models. We need to use those role models to market industrial engineering in the schools. Just sort of as a sideline, one of my final year students also, in her final year project, her name is Tammy Edie, she specifically looked at why are we struggling to address these educational imbalances. Specifically, the supply of BCI academically qualified candidates is not sufficient in order for the IE discipline to grow. And what she did then is she looked at the factors, she formulated also a survey. We got 176 responses to that survey, and then she tried to identify the factors. And here are some of the conclusions, exactly as it is in her report. I didn't reword it. Firstly, the BCI students basically reported that they were not approached by any university to market the IE discipline. They learned about industrial engineering through family and friends. So there's a gap. We are not doing our job there. Secondly, and this is worrying, technical students were less concerned about the quality of the qualification that they receive after graduation. The academic reputation of the institution was of a lesser concern for them. And that's very different from the white students. Thirdly, there's a large discrepancy between the attitudes of white students and BCI students based on the importance of cultural and racial diversity. She basically asked them, how important is this concept of diversity for you? For BCI students, this is important. White students are still trying to ignore it. And that creates also a perception within the student communities that people are not always feeling welcome. Fourthly, the funding situation seems to be more of a concern for BCI students. BCI students have more of a requirement to get funding than the white students. Number 5, the BCI students in the academic universities are also the lower or the weaker academic student. And quite often, we actually allow BCI students into the academic programs who do not meet the entrance requirements. And then lastly, the language of lectures was observed to be highly important also to the BCI students. So that's just a side perspective of what she found in the study in the last year. So, another slide from Shapiro. This is Heineke Meyer, somewhere in 2015. There's transformation and there's performance, and I'm equally committed to both. Well, look at those graphs. I say the same thing. There's transformation and there's performance, and I'm equally committed to both, but we must make it a success. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Corne, for all the research you've done and sharing with us. I think there may be quite a lot of discussion, but we will have time for about 2 questions, 2 medium-sized questions or 3 short questions. Let's see how it goes. Any questions from the floor or comments? Please, let's get into them, sir, and then is that fine? 2 questions.
Who's first?
Good morning. I want to know that the utility index for blacks and whites that when academic institutions differ.
No, it was calculated exactly the same. So it did. Oh, you mean if that's is a Turkey one better than a US one, or is that what you mean?
Yes.
I didn't analyze that. I hope not. No, I didn't analyze that in detail. I basically just compared groupings of universities. I compared a technical university with academic university in total. Okay.
So what proportion of the industrial engineers in the marketplace are professional engineers? And what is your opinion then on the industry's drive to develop professionally developed engineers, irrespective if they are professional engineers?
The first portion, I'll have to ask Balder to give us a figure.
Give you a figure now. In SAIIE, we've got 30% of our members that is professionally or in progress or professionally registered with XR currently. We had a session yesterday where we discussed what is the SAIIE involvement in supporting professional registration and how we support our members with local registration to get there. It's actually for us a very important activity or to support our members to actually be registered professionals.
Yeah, and the second part of my question was, so maybe in your opinion, it came up through the research, but what is the industry drive to develop industrial engineers, not necessarily to professional level, but to develop them as employees?
I think it's quite significant. Quite a number of companies have little programs going. Companies like SAIIE, for example, have a very formal development program. Small companies like LTS Consulting are also very positive that they need to drive people to become professional. And I think the whole professional status is important because it's sort of another check mark against you that says, okay, I'm actually okay. Somebody else looked at my experience and I'm okay. And for industrial engineers, it's a very difficult argument because the personal gains you're getting from professional registration is not that obvious than for civil or electronic or electrical engineering. But it is extremely important for the discipline that we have that drive because that is what makes us an engineer. The fact that we as a SAIIE can exist as a voluntary association with EXA makes us qualify as an engineering discipline. That makes it possible for us to be part of the Washington Accord. That makes it possible for us to be accredited every 5 years by EXA as a successful engineering discipline. So it's very important that we do that. So we must do that not only for yourself, but also for the discipline.
So it's just not a question, it's just responses to other questions.
Yeah.
In terms of professional engineers registered at EXA that are industrial engineers, it's about 230 and probably round about the same candidate engineers registered.
230.
230 plus minus. I'm not quite a favour with the figures. This
That's
is
great. A few
related.
years ago it was less than 150, so there
Yeah.
was quite a bit of growth.
We've gone up and
Yeah.
we've passed 150. That allows us then to be have a word or a say in the engineering community as a whole. So, and then the other thing I commented on at the workshop yesterday is that I had one of the postgraduate students of mine has a company, and he was bidding for a government contract, and he needed a PR-Eng industrial engineer to bid for that contract. So that was just a bit of a revelation to me.
That was great.
Yeah. So.
Unfortunately, we don't have any more. Kim, you really want to ask a last question? Okay, please, last question from Kim.
Thank you very much for a very good presentation. I think we need to look within the university as well, because I believe that industrial engineering can do a lot within the university. And we need to ask a question: how much of our the faculty understand industrial engineering, and how can we implement industrial engineering within the university? Thank you.
Kim, thank you. Firstly, congratulations to Kim. He heard yesterday that he is now a PR Tech, professional registered technologist. Is that right? So congratulations to Kim. Yes, we fight the same fight also within our faculty. Luckily, in our faculty, we had showed them what we can do as industrial engineers, and we are at the moment one of the best performing departments in the faculty. But it's the same is true all over. We as industrial engineers need to defend our capabilities and show them what is possible, and thereby create success. Absolutely.